Patrick tapped his finger on the table in thought. It was a risky move, but he felt that he had to take it. Looking to his left was Campos. His face was calm and collected. Patrick knew he couldn't hide his stress as well as him. Finally, he made his decision and turned to Martin, who was dealing. "Hit me." Martin flipped over a card from the deck and handed it to the squad leader. It was a 10, which put his total to 20. Patrick let out a sigh of relief. Not perfect, but it might just do. Sitting up now relaxed a bit with confidence, he said, "I'll stay." Martin then turned to Campos and gave the same answer. As they began to reach for their cards for the showdown, Patrick's radio screeched. "Snow 1 to Snow 2, report to your post immediately and prepare for an excursion." Patrick quickly picked up the radio and spoke into it. "Snow 2 copies for Oscar Mike." Patrick's squad then dropped everything they were doing and stood up in near unison. Campos seemed to get very irritated and stood up. "Wait a fucking minute, I was about to win." Patrick turned to look at his squadmate and shrugged his shoulders. "Send the bill to the Department of Defense." Within a minute, they all grabbed their weapons and were headed out to the MRAP they had been assigned. The sky was a dim hue of red from the early sun. It was still too dark to see much without night vision outside of the base's lights. As they reached their vehicle, they each affixed their NVGs to their helmets before loading up. "This is Snow 2. We're loaded up and ready to move." "Copy, Snow 2. 2-foot mobile spotted to the northwest. Move to intercept and turn them around." "Copy. Moving to intercept. Snow 2 out." Patrick hung up the receiver and nodded to David, who was behind the wheel. David then turned the key and the engine roared to life. Then they soon began to move. Bodine excitedly cocked the .50 cal that was mounted atop the vehicle. Campos was unamused. Bodine seemed a bit too eager to light someone up. Campos felt as though he should temper him a bit to avoid any incidents. "Remember, Bodine, we're just going to turn them around. Be light on that trigger. I don't want any NDs." "Aye, Sergeant. I'll play nice." Campos shook his head and reached into his pocket for a pack of cigarettes. He pulled one from the box and placed it between his lips. Before putting the box away, he looked at Tanner, who was sitting across from him, and offered him one. Tanner waved the offered cigarette, to which Campos responded by closing the box and stuffing it in his vest pocket. Tanner looked at Campos and spoke up. "Figures that command would manage to make something as interesting as alien encounters into boring watches." "Because boring means everyone gets home alive. You also have to remember that we're here to do a job, not to make friends. Best you can hope for is getting shot at once in a while." Campos searched his pockets for his lighter. Just when he was about to ask if anyone else had one, Tyr reached out with a lit Zippo. Campos paused for a moment before bringing the tip of his cigarette to the flame and lit it. Campos patted Tyr on his shoulder as he stashed away the lighter. "Always got my back, Tyr. That's why you're my 2IC. The MRAP hit a large bump and began to shake as it drove off-road. As Campos smoked, the soldiers and marines fell silent, the sound of the rocking vehicle filling the air. After about a minute, Martin broke the relative silence. "So, how do you think they got here? The aliens, I mean." "That's easy. They walked," Bodine answered quickly. "I mean, how did they get on Earth, smart ass?" There was a short moment of thought inside the vehicle before Tanner perked up. "Well, they're obviously from space. Well, I guess they could have... But no, we would have definitely found them if they were here before. My best guess is that they flew down." "With what we've seen of their level of tech, I seriously doubt it. I mean, we haven't even seen if they have aircraft," Tyr retorted. "How the hell do they know exactly where they are, though? This place is remote, wild and big," added Bodine. Campos took a drag before replying. "What do you think happened after that early fiasco? The general came down hard on everyone. The orders at the time were that if a screw so much as farted, he wanted to report in a dozen pictures." Tyr chimed in as well. "I talked to a few officers and the scramble for intel was real. A satellite's trajectory was changed in order to get more coverage here. Dozens of recon teams were also deployed in the surrounding areas, and they doubled the tech support staff. They have their eyes on every piece of grass in this entire AO." David, who was driving, tapped on the metal roof to grab everyone's attention. "All right, we're 250 meters out from the coordinates." Campos snuffed out his cigarette. "Good, park it. We got to observe now. Their heading was east, the same direction as our base. Orders are that we have to keep an eye on them, but also keep them away if they get too close." Exiting the vehicle, they quickly fanned out in teams of 2, providing security in front of the vehicle. The soft underbrush cracked and bent onto their boots. After heading outside of vision from the MRAP, they knelt down and waited. Then the radio lit up a short time later. "Echo 3 Mike, I've got visual on them. Azimuth 284, about 200 meters away, moving east at a walking pace." In the distance, 2 tall figures walked along a small dirt trail at a steady pace. The radio soon lit up again. Copy, Echo 3, Mike, we've got eyes. Hold position and be ready. Echo 2, Bravo, remember what I said about that gun. Bodine sarcastically replied over the radio with a machine gun sound he made with his mouth. Campos couldn't help but roll his eyes, as he could hear a few sniggers from around him. Soon they all fell silent once again, and waited as the two Dakar approached. They continued to wait, hidden in the dark, until the aliens were a mere 20 meters away. The radio clicked on and Campos spoke softly. Hit it. The darkness was quickly quenched by the headlights of the MRAF flicking on, the Dakar stopping in their tracks and recoiling from the blinding beam. In the light it quickly became apparent that the two were unarmed, or at least lacked the bulky steam weapons that seemed commonplace among their ranks. After a few moments, Patrick spoke up. Turner, Harrison, Tier, move up slowly and restrain them. Without hesitation, the three stood up, and slowly approached, their weapons at the ready. As they grew closer, the taller of the two Dakar reached into his coat, causing the soldiers to stop and raise their weapons. Slowly, the Dakar slipped a box out of his coat and held it out in front of him. Though the suspicion of the box was unquestioned, Tanner continued to slowly approach, only having stopped for a moment. The air left the air as Tanner reached out and grabbed the lid of the box and lifted it, peering inside. He seemed to stare inside the box, possibly contemplating what he saw, before turning his head back to his squad. Hey, they brought us some kind of weird alien beef jerky. Campos lowered his weapon, thinking for a moment. It certainly wasn't what he expected, but then again, he didn't really know what he expected. Tanner reached into the box and pulled out a small slab of dried meat, and held it up to show his squadmates. If it was some kind of trap, they'd probably know by now, Campos figured. He stood up and called out to Tanner. You think they're supposed to be some kind of peace offering? Possibly. Or it could be some kind of attempt at a greeting. I mean, think about the last time. We gave them some jerky, so maybe they're trying to replicate that gesture. Campos stood up and took a few steps closer to inspect the meat in the box himself. The box was made of wood and seemed to be finely made, with several more slabs of dried meat inside. Campos looked to the one with the box and then to the shorter one, before turning to the two Marines standing behind him. Take them to the truck and shake them down. I'll call up command. Or bring them in. This was certainly going a lot better than Chalukik had thought it would. Aside from the fact that they were nearly scared to death by the human soldiers. How had they known that they were approaching the base from that distance in the dark? Did these humans have some kind of night vision? Was it natural, or was it another thing that they had created for themselves? Already he had so many new questions about this civilization. Crafty bastards, Chalukik said with a chuckle. Hartosh looked over to him. What? Crafty bastards? They always find new ways to surprise us. I mean, night vision, can you believe that? Well, they have built machines to let them fly, so why wouldn't they be able to see in the dark? I'm sure they even have a way to breathe underwater like fish. It wouldn't surprise me at this point. The thought of something like that made Chalukik a bit giddy. All this tech, he wanted to figure out how it all worked. He had to calm himself and remind himself why he's here. Business first, and then sometime in the future, he could have his day. The sun now peaked over the horizon. They were waiting for some time after being searched. Chalukik wondered what exactly the humans were planning to do with them. Whatever it was, they were certainly taking their time. 3 soldiers watched them. They seemed to be talking about them. Chalukik asked Harshtok if he could make anything out, but he could understand too little for their conversation to make any sense. After some time, the human that seemed to be the leader exited the vehicle and said something to the 3 guarding them. The 2 were then led to the back of the vehicle. One of the soldiers opened a door, letting Chalukik get a look inside. Even though the vehicle was quite large, the inside seemed to be more than a little cramped, even for the humans. He assumed that they wanted him to get in somehow. It definitely wouldn't be a comfortable ride. With a lot of hunching and bringing his knees nearly up to his chest, he and Harshtok were barely able to fit, though their tails didn't make fitting in any easier. After them, the rest of the humans squished in and closed the door. The constant stares from the soldiers didn't make the situation any less awkward. Soon the vehicle roared to life and they began moving. Chalukik hoped that the ride wouldn't be too long. His legs were already falling asleep. Tyr couldn't stop staring into their eyes. They seemed very strange to him. They were reptilian-like, yet they didn't seem soulless as he'd expect. He'd hunted plenty of animals before, all sharing that same dead stare. Maybe it was the fact that he knew they were continuous, and thus it was only a matter of perspective. Still, he found it a bit unnerving that something so beast-like had eyes with so much life to them. The shorter of the 2 then began staring back at him, which made Tyr quickly break eye contact. He then looked at their claws. They were considerably long and appeared to be quite sharp. With them being this close, that thing could easily start shredding his squadmates, and him if he decided to do so. Tyr gripped his rifle a bit tighter at the thought of that. A lump was beginning to form in his, though. He couldn't wait to get out of this damn MRAP. Hartosh couldn't help but notice that one of the humans was staring at him more intensely. When he turned to meet his gaze, however, it quickly looked down. He wondered what he was thinking about him. As a soldier himself, he could probably guess that he was being sized up. That's what he'd do in a situation like this. The humans didn't seem to have much in the way of natural defenses. Though small, they did seem a bit stronger than the average Dakar. That would be something he'd have to consider if he ever got into hand-to-hand combat with one of them. Hartosh then wondered how fast they could run. Thinking about it for a moment, he figured that the Dakar might have them beat in that department on account of their longer legs, though he couldn't be sure. Soon enough, they had arrived at the human base, the vehicle lurching to a stop and the back doors being opened. They all unloaded and were met by two unarmed soldiers, one of which had shiny stars on his collar, clearly an officer of some sort. The one that was leading the human squad walked up to the officer, and they exchanged some words before turning to Harstock and Chulukik. The officer walked up to them, and stuck out his hand and spoke in broken Dakar. "Greetings, Dakar." Harstock was confused by the gesture. However, Chulukik seemed to recognize what to do and softly grabbed the officer's hand. "Greetings, human. I'm Chulukik," he said, putting his offhand on his chest. The officer seemed to mouth the name a few times before placing his own hand on his chest. "Chulukik, General Everton." Everton then walked up to Harstock and a similar exchange occurred. After their exchange, the other of the two unarmed soldiers walked in front of them and began to speak. "Why here?" "We are here to learn your language and to hopefully keep the peace between our species," Chulukik responded. The soldiers seemed to think about what was said for a moment, then turned to Everton and exchanged a few words. Harstock hoped that they understood what was said, enough that they at least got the general idea. The translator then turned back to the two. "Acceptable." Harstock and Chulukik looked at each other. Chulukik had a wide smile across his face. It had actually worked. Harstock had to admit that the mad scientist was right. He just hoped that their luck wouldn't change. After being dismissed, Bodine decided the best way to spend the rest of his morning was to get madly drunk with Tanner while the rest of the squad played a bit of football. Tanner turned to Bodine. "Do you know how lucky we are? I mean, what are the chances that we make contact with aliens? Not once, but twice. Back to back, too." "Yeah, shit's crazy. Though I doubt we'll ever get to interact with them at all." Tanner kicked the dirt a bit in thought. He looked up at the game of football and took a drink. After kicking the dirt a few more times, he looked at Bodine. "Do you remember where they're keeping them?" "Yeah, why?" "I have an idea.